Welcome to the Vision and Purpose podcast, where we dive deep into the lives of incredible people who have made a mark on the world. Join us as we explore the journeys, stories, and passions of individuals who have achieved extraordinary feats, shattered barriers, and inspired us all. And now your host, Dr. Sharon H. Porter. Hello, and welcome to the Vision and Purpose podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Sharon H. Porter, and today we are featuring Ms. Nicole Ridley. Nicole is the head of operations for Financial Alliance for Racial Equity, also known as FAIR. She drives the development and implementation of strategies and programs. With over 15 years of experience in finance, investments, commercial real estate, strategic relationship management, and diversity, equity, and inclusion, she is a high-performing strategic thinker. Previously, Nicole held various leadership roles at Nationwide, including Chief of Staff for the Nationwide Investment Management Group. Welcome, Nicole.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sharon. It's such a privilege and an honor to be here.
Well, it is such a pleasure to have you as guests for this episode. And I'm just really excited about your journey and very interested in learning about your career journey and how you ended up as the head of operations at FAIR.
Yeah, so I love my journey because I think my journey is full of finding your purpose and leaning into your passion. So I, entered into college as an 18-year-old who just had hopes and dreams of making a ton of money. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know what that looked like, but I knew that one, I wasn't one of those lifers in school. I was like 4 years here, maybe 2 years in a master's, and I was done. And I entered into the Ohio State University as a psychology major, actually, because I just love analyzing people. I love helping people out. And so first semester at Ohio State, I had talked to my godmother, and she was, a school psychologist, and we were talking about career paths. And she said, Nicole, if you really want to make a lot of money, you're going to have to get your doctorate degree. So kudos to you, Dr. Sharon, for your PhD. That was not in my cards. That was not the route that I wanted to go. And so me, just eyes, one focus, one laser on money, 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 money. I called up my cousin, and he lived in New York, and he was doing very well for himself. And I asked him, I said, hey, yo, cuz, so I'm thinking about changing my major. What do I need to major in to make a lot of money? And that's all I didn't give him nothing else. I just want to make a lot of money. And he said, econ. And I was like, nope, try again. I don't like econ. Let's try something else. And he said, well, what about finance? And I was like, okay, I like math. I can do that. So went throughout all my career at Ohio State, graduated, got my master's degree, and thought I was going to build this like really big, beautiful career in finance. So I had a couple of traditional roles in the Treasury Department as a traditional financial analyst. I was in the Office of Investments. But as my career was chugging along, I was having those thoughts of, what do I do every day? Like, I go home, I lay my head on my pillow at night and reflect upon my day, and couldn't tell you what impact I made for the day. Because I couldn't see where my end goal was. And so I had the honor of being in a position at Nationwide at that time where I was doing this self-reflection of, I love coming into work every day, right? So let's talk about why I love coming into work every day. I was in the Office of Investments doing commercial real estate, which real estate I love. I'm the one that, will see an open house sign on the corner and be like, just stop by and see. So I love real estate. I was in a role that I enjoyed. But the best part about that moment of time at Nationwide was I had an opportunity to be heavily involved in one of their associate resource groups called the African American Women Active and Ready to Exceed. It stands for AWARE. And so during this tenure, I had went from helping out with community service efforts, helping their home office clusters, to serving on the cabinet as the treasurer. And so I was in this space where leadership was tapping me to become the next president of AWARE, and me being very futuristic is one of my top 10. I knew that if I take this presidency, I would only have at max 4 years left in a leadership role of Aware, because you get two-year terms. And so I started to think about and reflect, because for me, what made coming to work so enjoyable and me laying my head on the pillow at night was I had my paycheck work, which was Office of Investments, being in the commercial real estate space, but I also had my heart work, which was Aware, that DE&I, people person, relationship building. And so I started to reflect that in 4 years, my heart work may go away. How is coming to work going to feel for me? And so I was doing some self-reflection. At that moment, I had an opportunity to be in a program here in Columbus, Ohio, called the African American Leadership Academy, where they teach you a lot about you. And so I was taking those lessons, taking what I was feeling, thinking about where I wanted to take my career. And I started up on this journey of, I want to blend what my superpowers are, what my passions are, and take my heart work and my paycheck work and combine it into one of me. And so I was doing some networking throughout Nationwide, found out about this department called Affinity, did a lot of networking. And about 9 months later, I accepted a role within the department, and I lit up. While it was on the P&C side of Nationwide, that's property and casualty, there was still a finance component, because I was managing about 30 of Nationwide's relationships. So think of, the Ohio State University. I had their HBCUs. I had, from the Divine Nine, I had all of the fraternities. And so I was working with this diverse portfolio, right? Relationship management, which is one of my superpowers. But there was a finance component, because we were working with contracts. Does this partnership make sense? How do we make this partnership really work for both parties? But I loved my job. I would say within the week of me being in that space, a friend of mine came to me and said, there's a different light about you. There's a different aura. And I was like, because I feel like I'm in a place of purpose. So, me, chugging along in the space, really enjoying it. I really thought and had visions of, I'm retiring here. I'm going to get that corner office. I'm just going to continue to climb in this department. But I had a little bit of self-reflection once I got to around the year and a half mark, where I was a consultant at that time, and I knew my next logical step would be a senior consultant. And I'm very politically savvy. And so I remember this day so clearly. I popped up from my cubicle, and I looked at the senior consultant cubes, because they're built a little different. And I started to analyze the people that were in those seats. And so for me, I was saying, okay, they love this job just as much as I do. If I want to move my career at the pace that I want to move my career, I need one of them to leave in the next year or so. Is that going to happen? I knew that wasn't going to happen. And so I was talking to some of my mentors, and they said, Nicole, you are a Black woman in finance. You have a degree. We've got to get you back into the financial space. And for me, I was like, I'm loving what I'm doing right now. But I went on what I call the Make It Make Sense tour. And I was trying to make this degree on my wall make sense. I was trying to make my student loans from the Ohio State University make sense. And I had a chance to go into a program at Nationwide called the Financial Services Leadership Rotation Program. And this is, for me, is where the goosebumps start to happen. Because I enter into this program in 2019, and I was working up under a leader who had acquired a couple of new business units. And leader said to me, hey, Nicole, go talk to some of my direct reports. They have some projects that they want to present to you to work on. Because in the rotation program that I was in, you had a 1-year stint in a business unit working on a project, and you did that 3 times. So for me, it was an opportunity for me to get my foot into financial services, understand the landscape, and then make a decision on how I'm going to pivot and make it make sense. And so one of the first leaders that I met with, she had this really rough PowerPoint presentation talking about DE&I and Black advisors. And because I was working in the DE&I space with Aware, being in the financial services space, I instantly gravitated towards that research. And so I went back to, my executive sponsor and I said, I'm really like leaning into this. And understandably, they said, this research just came out. We're not sure what we're going to do with it yet. Let's put you on another project while we figure this out. So me being who I am, I rotated onto another project, but I always kind of kept the pulse on what was going on with the Black advisors. So as I'm working through the leadership rotation program, I rotated off of my first leader into my second leader. I started to hear things about FAIR, right? And I'm like, oh, that's what they did with this. And so just by me reconnecting with the leader, just wanting to learn more, going to, their first HBCU live event, but just really staying plugged in and tuned into what was happening in the space. So fast forward about 4 years, I'm sitting in my role as chief of staff, still staying plugged into FAIR. I knew that they were hiring for the head of operations role to stand up FAIR outside of Nationwide. But the strange part is I never considered myself.
Wow.
I knew of a couple people who were interviewing for the head of operations role, and I was being their cheerleader. I was being their sponsor. I was like, oh my God, they would be great. Like, they're fantastic. They have this experience, that experience. But I never considered myself until someone called me. It was early in the morning. It was about 8 o'clock. I'm getting ready to go into work, which at that point I was hybrid. I was only in the office 2 days. I was going in that particular day to hear a really good mentor speak on a panel. She's a leader in the financial services department at Nationwide. And, she calls me, we talk real quick, and she said, have you considered yourself? We talked about it a little bit, and I said, let me think about it. I'm on my way to work. I'll call you by the end of the day. So had a quick conversation with my husband. I said, but we'll talk about it more when I get back from work. So kind of like backing up a little bit, maybe 2 weeks prior to that, I had a conversation with my mentor because I was at this crossroads. I loved DE&I work, but I wanted to be in financial services. And so I was kind of contemplating the idea of stepping away from financial services and going the HR route. And my mentor said, Nicole, 2024, you have to make a decision. You can't straddle the two because you either have to lean into financial services and start getting your licenses, or you have to lean into HR and figure out what skill sets you need to load in. So I want you to focus on one. And I said, okay, 2024, I'm going to make a decision. So this is about November timeframe when I got the call. So kind of fast forwarding, it's kind of setting this up for context. So had the call, leave for work that day, walk into this huge auditorium at Nationwide where they do a lot of their big meetings. And every associate at Nationwide knows this. When you go in, you kind of do the scan of the room, right? You kind of like map out your route. Am I going to sit on this side? Am I going down the center aisle? Am I going all the way up front? Do I see a friend in the audience? You do the scan. Right down in front, center aisle, was my mentor that said, you got to make a decision. So and he had an open seat next to him. So I walked down and I sit next to him and I lean over and I said, hey, what do you think about me applying for the head of operation role for FAIR? And he was like, I think that would be amazing. I think that would be a great opportunity. And kind of like the whole meeting, he kept leaning over like, how it would set you up and this, that, and the other. So the whole meeting, he's like, in my ear. But where it really happened for me was, remember I said I was going in specifically that day to hear one of my leaders speak, to hear one of my good mentors speak. She was talking with the president and CEO of the American College. And George opened up and said, to not verbatim, but in the vein of, before we start this conversation, I want to thank Nationwide for creating an organization such as FAIR. FAIR is going to transform the way the financial services industry looks. It is going to really, catapult, this work. And I just appreciate Nationwide for creating FAIR. And for me, that was all I needed. I said, all signs are saying apply. And I'm very much of a type of person where I have a strong board of directors. I would have probably had 10, 11 conversations before hitting apply. But I had one more conversation and I shut it down. I said, this feels like my role. And that's what led me to FAIR today. And I just feel like it's a complete, 360 circle as I'm working in the financial services space. So I made it make sense, right?
Yeah.
When I make my student loan payments, it makes sense. When I look at my degree, it makes sense. But I'm working in a space of DE&I. And for me, my superpower and what I want to feel in a role is impact. And so for me, it was a no-brainer to come aboard and be the head of operations for FAIR.
I absolutely love that, because what it really speaks to, and also, your previous role as chief of staff and Nationwide, that had to undoubtedly really help structure what you're doing now and prepare you for this role. This, like, that whole journey that you just gave is unbelievable. How has that previous role in Nationwide really helped prepare you for where you are now?
Yeah, it's so funny because I tell you, like, I'm very futuristic. I'm very strategic, right? So as I think about my next roles, I don't really think about it as I want this title, this position. At Nationwide, I was building a skill set tool belt, right? And so I was thinking about, I wanted to be in a leadership position. I wanted to be a people leader. I wanted all of these things. What skill sets was I missing, and how do I put that in my tool belt?
Yes.
And the reason why I took the chief of staff role is because I wanted to see how decisions were made. I wanted to see that strategic thought process with leaders as they're sitting around the table to roll out our strategy for the next year. I wanted to be behind the curtain to understand that, because I was always in front of the curtain.
Yeah.
And I think being in that role, it taught me a lot about being a great leader. It taught me a lot about decision making. It taught me a lot about how to just formulate a well thought out plan. And so I think all of my careers alone at Nationwide has set me up for where I am today. But I think being in that chief of staff role and being behind the curtain is probably my biggest arsenal that I have in my tool belt.
I love that. I really do. And the fact that, the focus, the HBCU students, because I think back, I'm a 2-time graduate of HBCUs, and I think of my undergraduate at Winston-Salem State University. Had I latched on to something such as this to help me set myself up, just where would I be now? You know what I mean? So the work that you're doing for these young adults is impactful. You say impact is what you're looking for. Hands down. Hands down.
And that's the thing that really kind of pushes me forward, because I come from a family where my dad has had his own HVAC company. My mom worked in corporate, but she worked for a different purpose. She worked for benefits. She worked for the flexibility to tote 2 daughters to and from practice, to and from cheer, to and from this, to and from that, right? And so honestly, part of my career is, I spent around 15 years in total at Nationwide. But my first 3 years there, I say corporate America chewed me up and spit me out, because I did not have the skill sets to properly navigate that landscape. I had to leave to come back to be like, okay, let's do this.
Let's do it.
And so that's kind of what I want to pour back, because all of the life lessons that I've learned all the way, I give kudos to the African American Leadership Academy. I have several friends who have gone through it, and they come to me and they say, hey, what is your experience? And I say, life changing, because it taught me about, yes, you need that intellectual piece to succeed in corporate America, but you also need that political and social aspect as well. And those are the gifts that I want to sow into students, into individuals that are, getting ready to graduate and head into corporate America,
Yes.
giving them these tools that I wish I had back when I started at Nationwide, because I would have been suited and booted and ready to go
Yes.
versus like learning these life lessons along the way.
Absolutely. I absolutely love that. And so from your perspective, what do you feel are the main factors that really contribute to pay gaps in finance and investment sectors?
Yeah, I would say that some of the main contributors in the pay gap is a couple of things. So, one, I would say personal experience with, for me, is in finance. I was always the one, right? Not only the only woman, but the only Black woman who household runs on two incomes. So I was in a space full of men who didn't look like me, who had wives that were at home. And here I am trying to run a different household dynamic than them. I was the one where, hey, I'm going to be in a little late because I've got a little one to take to the doctor's appointment. Or, hey, I have to call off because I have a little one that is homesick. So for me, the pay, it's not 100% clear on, why the pay gap exists, because there's a little bit of that lack of transparency. It's one of those things, you don't talk politics, you don't talk pay.
Right.
But that, that perception is always there that we get paid less just because of all of the things that we're juggling, all of the things that we're balancing. No, I can't hop on a plane within a week's notice and give you an answer right now because I need to go home, talk to my husband. Are you available? What does your work schedule look like? This is what the kids had. And so I think that there are a couple of things that we're factoring into it. Can I say that there was a pay gap for me? 100%. No, because there was not that, transparency aspect, but I do feel like that those were some of the contributing factors.
I love that. Thank you. Thank you for that. So, what role do you think diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives play in addressing pay gaps? And also, how can organizations effectively integrate them into strategies?
Yeah, I think DE&I is such an important piece in all aspects. One is that advocacy part, but what I really love about DE&I is that it's highlighting inequities. It's unrevealing some of those unconscious bias. As the leader of Aware, I did a webinar where we talked about the importance of diversifying and having a diverse team, right? But I think it goes a little bit beyond. And what I was teaching individuals in the leadership capacity, like diverse team starts in the hiring process, right? And so having that diverse panel to help kind of combat some of those unconscious bias that may creep in. And so what I think DE&I work and kind of having those life lessons is it's highlighting those inequities. It's promoting balance. Effective DE&I work aims to create balance by addressing, various barriers, differences, ensuring that individuals have equal opportunities. It's not enough that we're in the space. It's not enough that we have a chair at the table. It's about having those equal opportunities. And for, a woman, for a working mother, do I have the same opportunities as my counterpart who maybe don't have to do all of the balancing and the juggling act? So that's why I think DE&I work is important, for highlighting those inequities, promoting that balance, and really having individuals around the tables to be advocates in our spaces.
Exactly. And here recently, we've heard the term thrown out, in the political campaigns. It's not a negative term at all, but people try to use it in that way. And I think that's where we have to be a voice to educate, right? And inform, just as you did, because it's not negative. But when you try to use it that way, use it as a weapon to make it seem derogatory, that's where we have to stand up and make sure that our voice is heard about that.
Yeah, and we recently did at FAIR a webinar where we called it Reclaiming the Code Switch. It was all about being your authentic self in your workspace. And one of the panelists dropped a nugget that I thought was so profound in what he said. He said, when we talk about diversity of people, it's looked upon negatively. But when we talk about diversity in other spaces, it's not. So when I talk to my financial advisor, they're always talking about you need to diversify your portfolio. You need to diversify your stock options, right? When
Yes.
I think about, in a women's sense of, world of clothes and shoes, like I
Yes.
want to diversify my shoes. I
Yes.
don't want to have the same pair of shoes
Absolutely.
in my closet. I don't want to have the same shirt. I want to have a variety of different things. And so I thought it was very interesting and profound that he said, when we use the word diversity with people, it has a different meaning, a different connotation when we talk about diversity outside of
Exactly.
spaces.
I like that point. Now, how do you think companies in the finance sector specifically create a culture that supports that transparency and fairness in compensation? Because just like you said, that's one of the things that you just don't talk about.
I think the biggest thing is representation. And so, one of the things that we really hone in at FAIR is when people think about financial services, because that's our whole mission is to transform the financial services space. I think a lot immediately go to financial planning, wealth management, being a financial advisor. But within FAIR, what we're trying to do is show students the breadth and depth of the financial services industry to really help, create that Black wealth, create that generational wealth, and really help the communities that we serve. And the message that I hone in is that we need people around the table. We need representation. And the only way that's going to happen is if we have individuals in marketing, in HR, in
Mm,
IT, in leadership role. And so that's why I think representation is important. Who's around the HR table when we're making the decisions on, okay, we have this candidate. She's a great candidate. Let's offer her this amount of number. HR has those data. HR has those facts where someone could speak up to say, okay, I love that we're hiring her, but kind of help me understand why we're coming in at this salary versus that
mm.
salary. So I think representation is important. We need those voices around the table.
Wow, I love that. And although your work at FAIR does not only consist of women, what advice would you give to women in finance who are advocating for equal pay and also seeking to advance in their careers?
Yeah, so I wouldn't be where I am today without what I call my amazing board of directors. And so I think step one is to find a mentor. And you have to seek out a mentor and I'm going to use diversity because diversity for me is not a bad language. You have to diversify your mentorship circle. You have to
Yes.
diversify your board of directors. And you also have to be intentional about who is on your board of directors. And so what I mean by all of that is I don't want all Black women on my board of directors, right? I need some allies. I need some decision makers. But I also treat my board of directors like my friend group, right? So if I have a problem, I think about to myself, do I want somebody to calm me down or do I want somebody to hype me up? The phone calls are two different people, right? I might be calling her like, I need you to hype me up, or I'm calling you to calm me down. And so when I am looking at my mentorship circles, I have all of those. I have that individual where I could be my raw and authentic self, where I have said to mentors before, like, let me be Nicole, like, let me take off my blazer, let me say this for a moment, and then I'll put it back on, and then we can talk strategy, right? But I needed that person, that safe space to vent. And then I had those board of directors where, before the meeting, I had my nationwide pen on. It was all straight. I would come in my heels with my blade. So I had a very diverse board of directors. But then you also need to be intentional about who are the decision makers and how are my board of directors connected to the decision makers? Because after you find that mentor, after you build those board of directors, you want to make sure that you can turn one of those mentors into a sponsor.
Mm,
And no, I don't mean asking that mentor, okay, hey, we've been talking for a minute. Can you be my sponsor? Because sponsorship comes organically because you want people to wear your t-shirt in rooms where you are not in to help advocate for you. So it's building a mentor, being intentional about it, and then seeking to take that mentorship into sponsorship so that your name can be in rooms in a positive way where you're not in.
thank you for that. Sponsorship is so important and just I feel really just getting the due justice that it deserves here lately within the last 5 years or so. We see the benefit of someone speaking your name and speaking in places where you're not. So thank you for that. Looking ahead, what do you see as the biggest challenges and opportunities in achieving equal pay for women in the finance and investment sectors? And also, I want to even touch on our younger people that are now coming out of colleges and into their careers as well.
Yeah, I think for me, I think it's going back to that representation. I think a lack of women in leadership who can advocate for equal pay will drive change. Increasing that representation, I think, just positions us to really critically address these pay discrepancies. I also think, when I think of the traditional gender roles, what I love is that expectation is kind of dwindling down a lot.
Yes.
COVID, did a lot to our country, but I think one of the positive things that it has done is I don't really say work-life balance, I say work-life integration.
Integration.
But,
Yes.
having the ability to work from home openly and it acceptingly really helps, women who are mothers, right? Kind of balance the two. And so not being in that, traditional, what we call gender roles, how that could negatively impact a woman's career, because now we have the opportunity to integrate our lives and balance our lives in different ways. And so I think, again, the biggest one is that representation. And I think it is, kind of breaking down those traditional gender roles where society is accepting, how we, work and navigate in today's space.
Thank you. And you talked a lot about mentors, different ones, different leaders who have really poured into you, who you consult, who you listen to. Um, if you can name a few, who have been some of those mentors or role models in your career, and exactly how have they influenced your views on equal pay and leadership?
Yeah, so I have a couple of sheroes in my book. So when I think about when I started my career at Nationwide, one of my very first conversations was with a powerhouse that was at Nationwide. Her name was Donna James. And Donna James, for me, was that person that I looked up. Like I could look at the top of the house and I saw her, but I also saw her being her authentic self. We had a really like raw conversation, and I just really appreciated her being a Black woman in the space that she was. And at that point, it was one of few. Nationwide's landscape has changed completely since then, but she was one of few, but she was
Mm,
holding her own, right?
wow.
And so she was a shero. I think about Gail King, who was an executive at Nationwide as well, because I saw how she really transformed the way the culture at Nationwide looked, the way the culture of Nationwide felt like. What I really enjoyed about my tenure at Nationwide is in Aware, we had a saying, and it was lift as you climb. And I think Black women sometimes have the perception of being in a competitive space, but within the walls, we were lifting as we climb. I remember one of my dear friends, she got promoted from a director to an officer of the company. And when you're an officer of the company, you get an office, you get a door, you get your name on the door. And we were cheering her on, and we were like, yes, sis, like you did it, you did it, you did it. And I loved her response because it wasn't, oh, thank you. I'm really happy. I worked hard for it. Her response was in the vein of, y'all next. Like, y'all gonna be right up here with me. And so that's the type of
Mm,
energy and the culture that,
wow.
Gail King, has or created at Nationwide. And I would not be remiss if I didn't talk about my dear mentor, Christy Rodriguez, who is the board president of FAIR. But for me and her, like watching her navigate her career, me sitting back and looking at her, she gave me the courage, unbeknownst to her, to be my authentic self. I saw her in spaces being Christy, being who she was, and being her
Mm,
authentic self. When in that moment in my career, oh, I was code switching. I mean,
wow.
I would be pulling in the Nationwide garage, rocking my music. But before I came in, turn it down low. right? And now, I pull it, or I used to pull into Nationwide Garage, rocking my music, bagged in my parking spot, turned it off, and walked into Nationwide being my authentic self.
Wow.
Um, and I accredit that from just, watching her successfully navigate. And then again, she has given me tons of tips, tricks, tools, lessons on how do I take my career from where it was to where it is today.
Wow. Thank you for that. What are some key lessons that you've learned throughout your career just about advocating for yourself and others in the workplace?
Yeah, you have to be an advocate. You have to be a voice. Don't be afraid to stand up for things that you feel are right, right? If you feel like something is right, or if you feel like something is not going right, don't be silent in the corner. You are your biggest advocate. And if nobody else is going to be a champion for you, you be a champion for yourself. There were a couple times within my career where I had to have those hard conversations with leaders where you're walking into a space and a person in a position of authority, and you have to close the door and say, let's have a conversation. But having those conversations don't have to be combative. It doesn't have to be, I don't want confrontation. It just has to be a piece of, I like to always start it off of like, I'm struggling with something, like help me understand. And I think if you phrase it and question in it, now I remember one conversation I spent 45 minutes like, no, we're gonna question this thing until you see my perspective. They finally saw my perspective, but I did it in a respectable manner. So I think one of the biggest lessons I've learned is being that advocate for myself, not only in tough situations, advocate for those positions that you want, advocate for the respect that you want, advocate for the pay that you want, advocate for the time that you want,
Mm.
be your biggest advocator.
Absolutely. Miss Nicole Ridley, I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time out and just sharing some insight on the work that you do at FAIR. What are some upcoming events that you all will be doing? And also, how can our viewers and our listeners connect with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are really excited. We will be on the campus of Howard University on September 18th for our signature event called HBCU Live. Now, while we are on the campus of Howard University, that does not mean that all HBC or only Howard University students can come. We are welcoming all HBCU students. To register for the conference, the cost is zero. If you are a student who is one of our FAIR Firm partners, and that list of our FAIR HBCU partners are online. We are providing transportation for those students. So that's a really special conference. But what I am doing for this event for this year is I am really curating an event for HBCU students. Students are going to walk into the event feeling energized. They're going to walk out of the event feeling like, wow, that conference was built for me. We have great content, great panel speakers, great breakout sessions. We'll have a career fair there where we will have individuals from our partners having career booths to talk to students. We will have HR representatives on campus or in the facility to take a look at students' resumes, to give them some tips and tricks on how to enhance their resume, because it could be a single tweak of, hey, move this here, down there. I remember one of my HR representatives was like, Nicole, you've been out of school a little minute. We don't need your education at the top. Move it to the bottom. They'll need to know all that. But, just those little tips and tricks. So we are really curating an event that is going to be built and made for HBCU students. It's going to be hype. It's going to be live. We're going to have student MCs. We're going to have student speakers. It's really going to be an amazing event. And again, that's September 18th. On Howard University's campus, and to stay plugged in to all of the wonderful events that we have and opportunities. We'll have a scholarship rolling out here soon. You can visit thefair.org, and that's the fair, THEFARE.org. And if you click the join the calls button, you'll get on our distribution list and you'll find out there.
Thank you. I look forward to that September 18th event at Howard University, one of my alma maters. So I'm excited to definitely plug into that. So thank you again. This has been indeed a pleasure. So much information. I just wish you continued success on your career journey.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the time, Dr. Sharon.
Absolutely. And to our viewers and to our listeners, we thank you as well. We thank you for joining another episode of Vision and Purpose as we explore the depths of our guests' vision and purpose. Your vision is the compass guiding you through life, and your purpose is the fuel that propels you forward. Keep dreaming, keep believing, and keep pursuing your purpose. Every step you take brings you closer to the fulfillment of that purpose. I'm your host, Dr. Sharon H. Porter, and until next time, live life with vision and purpose. Thank you for joining another episode of Vision and Purpose Podcast. Please share, like, and subscribe. Please join us every Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern Time.